are here on Facebook Live. So excited that you could join us today if you're with us and watch us do the thing that we do with the podcast, but doing it live. Marta?
Yeah, and we're working really hard to pretend like this is normal, that like she and I sit here like this and we chat like this with our beautiful coffee cups and the sign and our t-shirts,
but usually you're in Medellin, Colombia, and I'm in Chicago, so it's also a special treat to have you here in the DS Leadership Live office, which you never get to see, so
it's nice.
It is nice. All right, but what we're talking about today, that is nice, and it's exciting to be in here, but what we're talking about today, Marta, we're going to talk about partying at work.
Okay.
And how we want to use some partying to build relationships and how that might not be the best choice.
I'm never guilty of that, so I might not have a lot to say, but that's fine. That sounds good.
Are you trying to convince me that you don't party at work? I happen to know on more than one occasion. As a matter of fact, well, our first podcast that we did together, there was a little...
Yeah, we were in Vegas, so that was a little bit different. But generally speaking...
Yeah,
no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, okay. So really the topic today is... how we want to, really the topic is how we want to build relationships with our team, you know, and if you're in a leadership role, how we want to do that. And it can be tempting. It can be tempting to say, we're going to get everybody together, we're going to go to all these social outings, and that once and for all will create our positive relationships.
Okay, so the actual topic is, like, managers want to create relationships at work. And many, perhaps, fall prey to this idea that, like, the more boozy social outings you have, the more like beautifully united your team is. So we're going to sort of dissect that idea.
We're going to dissect that idea. And we're thanks. And bring in the idea of small talk, which is like, that's just what happens.
This feels a little small talky.
It does? Right now? I think this is
only because of like all of this setup, you know.
You're distracting yourself with the setup. Yeah. I got it. Just good. All right, so that's what we're talking about today.
Okay.
But we have to do our approach, which is appreciations.
Okay.
So we're going to share appreciations. Now, I do want to say one thing before we get to appreciation. We are going to be taking questions.
Yes.
But we're going to do that at the end. Of our show.
Yeah. Let's explain the whole setup.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Context. So we are going to take questions today.
Okay.
You're with us. Thank you. And we are going to be taking your questions, but we're going to do it at the end of the show. So the show will be about 30 minutes like it usually is. And we're going to take your questions at the end because we want to stay in the flow of our conversation and we want to maintain that context of the podcast and not get distracted. So that's
even though we look like professionals, that would be really hard to manage.
Yeah, it's distracting.
Yeah, like having a three-way conversation.
Yeah.
Also, did you want to mention the recorder?
I do want to mention it. Thank you. We also are recording today's show on our digital recorder. So if you are wanting to go back and listen to the show, it's still going to be posted on Friday. So we'll post the digital recording of the show as well.
Okay, and that's why the recorder's sitting there.
Yeah, it is.
So,
all right. So appreciation time.
You want to start?
I will start. I'm going to appreciate a very, very important person who has entered my life, Teddy Height.
Woo! Teddy!
And
he's here.
Yeah, he is here. He's in the background in the Gage Collective, who has made this possible and is helping us with all things social media and digitizing content and all the good stuff that he does. So
pretty much everything.
Yeah, he's amazing.
He does everything.
And so Teddy Height, lots of appreciation to you today and the Gage Collective, his new company.
Yes. Yay! Okay, and I do hope you stick your face in at some point. Maybe towards the end. I would like to appreciate my book club that is here in Chicago, which I have not, unfortunately, been able to see them since I moved. But I was thinking about this topic, and I was thinking about, it's sort of a similar thing. Like, we're coming together as a book club every month, and the way that we're creating the connections that we have and that we had, and they still meet, which I love, is through books. And it just got me thinking, all of the different ways that you can get to know people and all of the different, parts of their life that you can learn, even just by doing something like discussing a book. You learn so much from somebody when you hear their perspective of a book. So,
which I imagine, and this was a book club that you started.
Yes.
Yeah. Which I imagine that, when you're getting into those topics, whether around books, the humanities, you get beyond small talk.
Exactly. Not a lot of small talk, getting right to the heart of it. And, we were pretty good about it. Didn't, it wasn't like a late night thing. It wasn't like we're pretending like we're going to read, but really we're just going to get together and go out. It was like we read the books. We talked about the books, So, I would like to appreciate my book club.
Oh,
and I miss you guys.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, let's dive into our topic. So, So small talk, bringing people together. How do we create these relationships at work? Now we're going to bring in other people's work today too. We're going to talk about Jane Dutton, who's one of my favorites. Love her, creating high quality connections. And we're going to talk about some of Google's research on teams, and we've talked about that before on the show, and what they discovered about highly effective teams. And then we're really sort of going to turn this idea about we're just going to create these great connections by just hanging out on Friday night, kind of turn it on its head a little bit, because. Right. To your point, Marta, when we were discussing the topic, it sort of sounds like I'm saying, like, don't do that, which... Right, which I'm not saying, even though you thought that's what I was saying. Okay. We're not saying not to do that, right. But I think it's really understanding what's the value in doing that, and when does it have value, and when doesn't it? And I think we're going to make an argument for when it does have value as well, and when small talk can be helpful, and when it's fine, and not a big deal. Right. But just not as the main... way of creating relationships.
Like people lean on that too much. Like they totally depend on that, to magically unite people, connect people.
Yes, exactly. All right, so that's what we're really talking about. So why do we care about relationships at work? We have a relationship.
That's a great question.
Now what I've just done is turned the show into an interview mode. I'm going to be interviewing
I don't know. Where are you going with that?
Well, we spend about 48.7 hours a week at work.
There you go.
In these United States. And so we spend a lot of time at work. We want to have meaningful relationships. And it can be vulnerable, right, for us to have these deep conversations or to start revealing parts of ourselves. And it can feel like it's just easier to live at the surface.
Right.
But we end up really feeling disconnected from ourselves and then disconnected from others. So we want positive relationships at work and meaningful relationships. Mostly, we spend a lot of time there. We spend a lot of energy there.
Yeah, I always forget that. Like, I forget that... if you're like going to an office every day or going to a school or wherever it is that you're going, you spend the majority of your time there.
Yeah, and so we want to have these great relationships. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to get to other ways of the how once we get into the context, but I do want to bring in the research of Jane Dutton from the University of Michigan, and she really talks about creating these high quality connections. So the 4 ways of building high quality connections. And what I love about her work is that she's talking about building connections with people, and she's not talking about spending a lot of time. And I think this is...
Ooh!
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So this when we look at her research and her data, and we start talking about, like, no, I need to have this outing. Yeah. And if we can't get everybody together for the outing, and I'll talk about my relationship with that as well. If we can't get people together for this outing, and everybody can't make it, then it's just not going to be as effective.
Right.
And what her data points to is that to really build high quality connections, meaningful connections, it doesn't mean you have to be sitting with a person for 2 or 3 hours at a time,
right?
To be able to do that in a moment by moment interaction at work.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like the old quality versus quantity.
Yes.
Argument.
Yes.
That makes so much sense, because I don't sometimes when I think about this idea of work outings, it feels forced, or I felt like I spend so much time here already. Please don't invade my tiny free time that is still existing.
Yeah, it's
that has a lot to do with my personality, but still, it's it doesn't feel. It's not like something that I would be excited about. It was something that felt like another thing I had to do that was work related.
Yeah, and I think often people feel that way.
Yeah.
It's like the obligatory. You got to go to the boss's party.
Right.
You got to make it to the boss's party. You don't want to miss the boss's party, right? And then it's an obligation, and you don't.
So awkward.
Yeah, you don't know anyone there, and it's going to be small. It's going to be a lot of small talk.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what it is. Right. I am more tempted to talk about your personality right now, though, instead of.
I know. Okay, but we'll skip that. That's not.
But I have a reveal. Even though I have a very extroverted personality, I too do not like the obligatory, out social gathering at work, mostly because I don't enjoy small talk, which is how this show actually was born today. I was thinking through what are the things at work that I think we can get stuck in or we can get tripped up by, and this was one thing that we haven't really talked about. So I thought
you're right.
We
haven't. And I would always be the one who would text my one really good friend at work, if you don't come, I will kill you. And if that person wasn't there, it was just constant small talk, and you're just oh my god.
Yeah, you're how do I do this? Okay, that's.
I'm getting more into this topic.
Are you getting more with it?
Yeah.
Getting more with it? Okay, that's good, because if not, I'd be sitting here talking about myself. It'd be an interesting show, interesting podcast, but probably not as enjoyable. All right, so yes, so what to do. All right. So Jane Dutton's work, High Quality Connections. So I like it because she talks about not a lot of times. She talks about these 4 ways of building these high quality connections, which is trust. And we're going to come back to trust in a little bit, but trust, like I trust that you can do the job. I trust that you can, handle this. Respectful engagement.
Okay.
And that can be as simple as acknowledging something that somebody has said.
Right.
In a meeting, or giving a moment of acknowledgement to a person, or maybe to their experience that they might be having, right?
Yeah.
And then the third one is task enabling, and I love this one. It's really like helping somebody with something, and maybe not even directly, but giving them information they might need, or showing them how to do something.
Okay.
Or,
so like making it possible for them to do whatever it is that they
exactly. Yeah, and and making it possible for them to succeed.
Okay.
And then the fourth one, and this is the one that's going to come back to the social outing, play. And I think this
okay. Well, this is the most fun one. So obviously this is the one that we all latch onto and we're like, yep, gonna need to do that with my team.
And play, by the way, then we sort of get in this mindset that play can only happen outside of work. It can only happen.
So interesting.
Yeah. It can't
because the other 3 are obviously like built into the workday.
Right.
Like those are things where you're thinking to like, as you're saying this and I'm thinking of like what that would actually look like. I'm like, well, these are all things that happen while you're at work.
Yeah. Yeah. But not play.
But apparently not play. That's not allowed.
It's not. Especially here on the Super Fantastic Leadership Show.
As we're recording this podcast in the middle of the day. It's fantastic.
It has to be serious. Yeah. So, exactly. So, these 4 ways of task enabling, or these 4 ways of building high quality connections. And so, if you really look at that model, you can see how, you don't have to have a lot of time to do those, right? Like task enabling, respectful engagement, trust, and play. Those things can be happening in moment by moment instances. Now I am going to bring back the play one because I think this is where we start to think about social outings, and where we start to think about getting our team together to do things together. Okay. So we are going to talk about that. So I really like Jane Dutton's work.
Yeah, I like that. It's nice. It's like easy to understand, and it doesn't feel like these extra things that you need to figure out how to do. It's like really the way that she's saying that you build, these strong connections is ingrained in the way that you're interacting with people. Like, you're going to interact with them anyways, so why not do it this way?
Exactly. And she doesn't have a 5th one on there that's like booze it up. That's just not.
Say that.
She doesn't. Not she. Maybe that was in her original research, and she got rid of it.
We should ask her. She could be like our next interview.
She's so wonderful.
Yeah,
being a teacher, she's wonderful. But I really do. I do appreciate her research and her way of looking at how do we build positive, thriving organizations. So, and I like that she makes the point again that it doesn't have to take a lot of time. To do that and to start creating these connections with each other. Okay. So then we go to Google's research, which has been cited. I think their information came out last year about what does it take to create an effective team, and they kept looking at their data and looking at sort of how they put these teams together. They did sort of traditional things, like they put all their seemingly most intelligent people on a team, or people or the opposite of that, or put diverse groups together. All the different things that we sort of.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it was really interesting.
So they were doing like a live lab.
Yes, they have lots of data.
That's so cool.
I know, it's really cool.
Okay.
All right, well, here's what they found out. That teams that do well together had this way of creating psychological safety in the group, and they had high levels of empathy with each other.
That's so good. That's so us. They just described us. I love that.
A 2-person team. And everyone, because of that, then, when you start creating psychological safety, then people feel like they have a voice, they can be heard, right? And so that starts to create this environment where people are willing to take risks, they're willing to make mistakes, it sort of just opens up a whole way of connecting with each other. And again, what they didn't find in their research was going out and boozing it up is how you create.
Yeah, it's weird that wasn't in there. That one either.
I know, again, it wasn't in there. No, again, it might be part of it, but I think it just, when we look at how we create connections with each other, and when we look at how we create more effectiveness on our teams, defaulting to that mode might not be the best approach.
It's almost like, I love that they said that. I love, like, as you were describing those things, I was thinking, okay, so it's just like a workplace where you're allowed to be human, where you don't need to, like, pretend like I'm someone who never makes mistakes.
Yeah.
Or I'm someone who never has, like, crazy things happen in my life.
Yeah.
Which is wonderful. And I feel like the whole boozy thing is because people are, that's a word, Because
hyphenated.
People are uncomfortable with that. It's a way to skip over that.
Yes!
It's a way to not do it.
You nailed it.
Like, let's just booze it up, and then we'll come in tomorrow, and we'll have had, like, this bonding experience that we don't really remember, and so it's fine that we don't remember. And then, like, magically, we're united for life.
Marta, again, it's like, I think that's really the take-home thing. It's like, it's a way for us to get together, but not to truly connect.
Right. You're not vulnerable because you're not really there.
Yeah, I'm gonna end the show right here.
Okay. See y'all.
Right, and so that's it. And so when we, one of my great, and you reminded me of this actually, my great friends, Rob Weiner, Dr. Rob Weiner.
We love Rob.
Yeah, and he said, alcohol, and he said it so well. He's like, it can be used to enhance, and it should be used to sort of enhance. In other words, what he was talking, he wasn't saying use alcohol to have a better time. What he was saying was,
if there's alcohol.
Yeah, allow it to enhance your experience, not become the experience. And he was speaking to this. He might not even remember saying that, but you reminded me of him saying it. And I think what he was really pointing to was, of course, and this is where I want to kind of flip this around just a little bit, of course it's good to get together and to go out socially and to connect with each other and to, have some wings over a cold one. It's totally fine, or however you do it, or, whatever. However, if we let that become the modus operandi and the whole experience, we really can get lost. And to your point, we're really skimming the surface of connection. Yeah. And, we don't remember it on Monday morning anyway.
I know. And as we were discussing this, I was like, okay, yeah, I get it. So, Teddy, next time I'm in town, like, we should all get together and go out. And then I was like, I'm doing it.
But again, we're not saying that that's a bad idea, and I think this is where we have to be careful. We're not saying that's a bad idea. It's just when it starts to take over, or it starts to become sort of this compulsive, this is how we have to do it. Yeah. And if I'm not doing this with my team, if we're not all getting together and going out every Friday night, that means that something's really wrong with our team. Yeah. And so I had my own experience with that when I was leading teams, because I wasn't a person who naturally showed up that way to teams, and I'd kind of get together here and there, and and I loved everybody that I worked with.
Wait, what do you mean by you weren't somebody who...
I wouldn't organize, I wasn't a social event type of person per se, I didn't organize those outings, and, I was in my own head around that, like, that really meant something. It meant like I wasn't a good boss, or I wasn't a good leader.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and so...
So you as a manager were like, because I'm not doing this, I'm somehow failing as a manager.
Yeah, I was failing for other reasons. But no. And I
do tell.
But yeah, I had this sort of like, this is the way it's supposed to be done. And I think other people, I imagine other leaders have that too, that if they're not doing that, then we're really, you're really doing a disservice, and we should all be getting together and going out. And I think, Marta, this is the part that no one might be talking about on the team, is like, we got to get together and go to the boss's outing, and we got to get together, right? And so there's not room.
Turns into a chore.
Yeah, it turns into, exactly. So,
but then the flip side is like, then you're like, well, my team isn't like the fun team.
Yes.
Their team is the fun team because they all do all this stuff.
Exactly. And they're always going out. And
that hurts my feelings for you.
You're so empathetic. It's good though. I'm good. I worked through it. I pushed through. Yeah, it's true though. So we sort of can create all these stories around it. I think the deeper point though that you made so well is that, if we're using that to skim the surface, and I think that's what starts to happen. And that's the idea. That's where this whole idea of small talk comes into to a conversation, that when we're only doing that, then we're really not creating connection. And so how can we do that at a higher level? And the outings, although they could be helpful, are not the best way to do it. And so now I want to spin it just a little bit.
Okay.
Because it does sound like we're saying that that's not a good idea.
Right.
And that's not what I'm saying. I think it actually can be a fine idea. And here's where I think it can be a fine idea. I think it can be I think of like leadership conferences, or where you get your group of leaders together and to do something with very specific intent, where that's part of it, and where part of it is play.
Okay.
Where part of it is, we are just going to hang out. We're going to create this event, and we're going to, maybe do something really useful. We'll spend some time on a topic that's relevant to our leadership, and then afterwards, then we go celebrate and, shoot baskets or something like that, or we go to the pub and we play darts or something. Yeah. Do people still play darts?
I do.
That's still okay. That's still a thing. That's not like from the 90s.
I think you're good.
Okay. So we go out and we can do those things together, and that, I think, is where we have benefit. So we have an opportunity to connect and to go deeper in our relationships, and then we just go out and have play and go do something playful and have fun. So again, it isn't that those things are wrong, but I think really giving over the small talk or only relying on small talk to get our team together and to create those relationships isn't so helpful.
So do you think that when you do these social events, okay, I have a couple questions. Do you think that it should be tied to something that's going on at work? Like, we're going to celebrate this great thing that we just did, or we're going to get together and discuss XYZ, and then afterwards, we'll do whatever. Do you think it needs to be tied to something going on at work?
Not necessarily always. I wouldn't say that, but I do like the idea of you bringing up celebrating together as a team. I do think I'm going to bring that up in a minute, but I do think that's really beneficial. So it's nice when it's tied to something that way.
Right.
That there's team success that's being honored and celebrated is helpful, but not always. Not always. Yeah.
Okay, and here's my next question: do you think that this social outing needs to have some sort of I want to say activity, but what I really mean is purpose. Like, do you think it's ever okay just to be like, we're meeting at the bar Friday at 5?
I think it's okay to meet at the bar Friday at 5.
Okay, like that. It doesn't need to be like, there's some sort of just being there is fine.
Just being there is fine. But if it's the only way, if that's what you're relying on is a small talk and those types of things, I don't think that's going to be very helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, at the end of the day. Do you have another question?
Plus,
in addition, I felt something. I felt something.
Plus, I feel like by the time that there's something to celebrate, everybody wants to go celebrate it.
Yeah.
So you as the manager, you as the team leader, whatever your role is, when you're like, okay, finally we did this, we nailed it, now we're going to go do this, everybody's like, yeah, let's go. And it doesn't feel like a chore because everybody wants to go and let off some steam and not be so worky.
Yeah.
Worky, busy, worky, busy.
Hyphenated. I think you're right, actually, and I think having those moments and those benchmarks, like we had our spa time, right?
So
it was our team leader spa day, right? And that was us celebrating a big year, an accomplishment, several things that we had accomplished, and it was really fun, and we did want to go celebrate it, and it didn't. At least I don't think you saw it as an obligation.
No,
yeah,
no,
so, right.
Signed right onto that. I was like, we doing the same time next week or what? That's what I was thinking.
I think we should make this a regular practice every week. Weekly practice. Okay, so exactly. All right, so what to do? So, Jane Dutton's work I think is great. I think it's real-time application, and I think, looking at what Google and how do we, create more empathy, and I'm gonna come back to empathy in a minute, and then psychological safety. So we've got some real good markers.
Yeah.
And I say, this is really what creates connection and relationships on the team. And then I kind of came up with three sort of bullets, 3 things to watch for. One of them that wasn't really mentioned in any part of these, in either of these approaches, that I think is important. The first one, though, is trust.
Okay.
And I think if you really want to build a strong relationship with another human being, there has to be that balance of trust.
Right.
That's just, I think, a foundational component. And trust, in the simplest way that I think about trust, is at least doing what you say you will do and not doing what you say you won't do. I think that's helpful.
Oh, I love that.
I think it's helpful.
Okay.
So, and that comes back, we've talked about this on the show before, but, breaking agreements, that sort of thing, that's a real quick way to erode trust between the leader and their, subordinate or their follower on a team. That just does not create a real trusting environment. Now, there's other nuances to that as well, but at least at a baseline, I think that's helpful.
Okay.
I think that's helpful.
Doing what you said you will do and not doing what you said you won't do.
Yeah, very good.
Nailed it.
All right, so I think building from a foundation of trust is really helpful. The second that I think is empathy. And empathy, I think this gets confused in leadership. I think this gets confused on teams because empathy, we sort of think that because we can step into the other person's shoes, and I'm going to talk about taking the other person's perspective, that it means we won't have boundaries.
Oh.
That it suddenly means we won't have expectations about getting work done.
Okay, you've gotten a little too soft, and now, when you need them to get things done, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, if somebody calls and say, I had this really hard time with my, a family situation, or I'm not going to make it in today, or something that it means that, okay, well, don't, just take all the time you need, don't come in ever, whatever. It's just going to, that it just means...
See you never.
Yeah, that it just means total chaos. That's not... Empathy really is, and I think the key skill that I talk about with people when they're wanting to develop their empathy is perspective taking. And I think this is, again, Google didn't talk about it in this way, but I think this is what sort of shows up on teams is that when we're in a meeting or somebody's having a challenge, that we can step into that person's shoes a little bit and go, oh, how do they see the world that way? Oh, okay, I can get with that.
Right.
That makes sense. Now, it doesn't mean, again, that I don't, as a leader or boss, I'm not going to have expectations, but at least in that energy, the person will start to feel heard.
Yeah.
Right? And that creates the space, and that creates the way to stay present with that person when they're sharing whatever's coming up for them. So empathy, and then I think the real practice behind that, because empathy is very much a big construct.
Yeah.
But the big practice is, can you just practice perspective taking,
It's interesting how, for some reason, when people are practicing empathy, they think that negates their authority, or negates their ability to have expectations. That was a phrase that you used.
Yeah.
To me, and I get that, because I certainly felt that as a teacher. Well, if I let him do it this time, do I have to let him do it the next time?
Exactly.
You're always kind of but really those are two separate things. It's almost better to think of it as, I can be empathetic towards this person, and I can continue to have expectations of this person.
Yeah, exactly. Bingo.
Yeah.
Nailed it again.
I like
You're
that.
getting your third nail it in the show.
Love it.
I mean, really, really good. Okay, so trust, empathy, and then the third one is, and I know, I almost can anticipate your reaction when I say this one.
Okay, I'm so nervous.
Okay,
What is
so
it?
feedback.
Oh, God. I hate feedback. You know how I feel about feedback.
Do you really hate it?
I just listened to that episode that we did where I had to walk through the scenario of pretending to give. It was the whole thing was a scenario.
Did you do your assignment?
And I was sweating to death listening to the fake scenario that we created.
You created it.
I know. I can be 6 degrees removed from feedback, and I'm still oh. Yeah. So yeah, let me have it.
All right,
I
so
hate it. Let me hear it.
Why would feedback? I'm gonna ping you with this question. So
Okay.
I'm pinging you with it now. Why would feedback matter when it comes to developing relationships with your team?
Okay.
More than any relationship. But why? How would this be part of building meaningful relationships?
Because in the natural order of things, not everything goes perfectly, beautifully, swimmingly.
What?
You don't know what it is that I need. I don't know what it is that you need. And so there always reaches a point where somebody has to give feedback. And I hate that. But you're right. In order for the relationship to continue or to grow or to have any sort of significance, that has to be part of it.
Yeah.
I don't know who decided that, but that was horrible.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I don't know if it was so much a decision around things, but there's one part of it. I think that it's a bit transactional as a manager. To your point, something's not going well.
Right.
Well, we need to get results here. I need it to go well. So
Right.
how do I get it to go well? But I think at a deeper level, there's a vulnerability that comes with that. And I think this is the part that we don't talk about very much around giving and receiving feedback, that there's a real vulnerability. If I give you feedback, am I putting the relationship at risk here? What's
Right.
that? Are you going to listen to my feedback, or
Yeah.
do you care about my
Yeah.
feedback? And then there's also the part, when you're the receiver, to giving feedback, but when you're the receiver, then there's a vulnerability there. And so I think feedback, and I want to bring up another part to this, I think feedback starts to open, when you have trust,
Right.
and you've established that with a person, then you start to open up the channels even more in the relationship, that we can give each other feedback and receive feedback from each other. And that starts, to your point, is really what supports creating a thriving relationship. And the other part to this is that when you're a leader, when you really care about people, you want to, hopefully,
Yeah.
you want to support your person that's working with you. You want to support their development. You want you're supported too, but you really want to support the person's growth and development. And we can only do that
Right.
through feedback as well.
Yeah.
Giving feedback.
I think it's and it's the hard, I think for the first time, that's the hardest part, because A, you're setting the tone for the relationship, and B, like you said, it's the most vulnerable. Okay, how do I approach this person with this information? Because at this point you haven't needed to have a conversation this way.
Yeah.
And how are they going to react?
Yeah. Do it over a beer.
I
Just kidding.
I think it's a great idea. I'm sort of swinging that way now. Well, about that outing. That sounded like a really good idea.
Maybe we can have a feedback outing.
Yeah.
We just go give it.
Oh
feedback.
God, can you imagine? That'd be horrible. That'd be a horrible idea.
I don't know. Never tried it, but it doesn't
Yeah.
seem like it would be a good
Because
idea.
when you drink your, what is that called? Your level
Inhibitions?
of inhibition. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a
Declines
terrible idea.
rapidly. Right.
So, yeah, it's just really uncomfortable. I
Yeah, it
hope
is.
that one day we do an episode and I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about because I'm so cool with feedback. But that's not my reality right now.
Yeah, well, I think all of us, self-included, I'll speak, still to this day, I can give feedback and receive it, fairly well. I mean, there's just some parts of it that, are tough, can trigger us a little bit, and that's okay. But again, around having a meaningful relationship, hopefully we can reveal those things to each other, and
Right.
that starts to create, and again, that really gets us out of this idea of small talk. Because when we're giving and receiving feedback with each other, we're talking about the things that really matter to us, and I think that's really helpful. And it's really helpful to get relationships. And I can relate feedback. I was just thinking about this. I could relate feedback a little bit to Jane Dutton's work. I don't think this is how she classified it, but I could, when we think about task enabling,
Mm-hmm.
I could probably put feedback into that bucket possibly.
Right, like it's part of it.
Yeah,
or
it's
could
part of
be.
it. Because it could be helping somebody do better in their
Yeah.
role, better in their work. So I probably could put it
makes
into
sense.
that bucket. Yeah. So trust, I think, is a foundation in a relationship. We're establishing trust with each other. We've established trust, and that doesn't mean that you might not have a trust breach at some point in the relationship. But again, you can see how this comes all full circle. If we're if we're willing to understand each other's perspective and we're willing to give each other feedback, we can clear those things up really quickly, relatively quickly.
You know what this makes me think of?
No, I don't.
You know
But
how
I want to know.
Yeah.
Desperately.
You know how, okay, as you're saying this, I keep thinking, somebody who's going to do all of these things for you is someone who's always assuming the best about you.
Mm.
They're always assuming that you're coming from a place of wanting to, thanks, Teddy, wanting you to succeed, wanting you to thrive, wanting you to flourish. And I feel like it's so hard to maintain that. It's hard to be open and honest with people and continue that mindset and that perspective of this is coming from a place, a good place. This person always wants the best of me, because it's so easy to tell a negative story about it. Or it's so easy in your mind to always assume that the worst about somebody, you know, especially in intense romantic relationships. It's oh God, don't go down that road.
That you're having at work.
I think on this show we talk about leadership and life. So
We do. It's true.
yeah, but there's something all of that's somehow wrapped up together.
It is, and I think that's really the point, Marta. Is without a foundation. That's why I said trust. You'll trust that when I give you feedback, that it's coming from a good place, even though I might not do it perfectly.
Right.
That it's coming from a place that I have I really am for you.
Right.
I want you to succeed, and I think that's very relevant.
Which allows me to overlook the perhaps not perfectly given feedback.
Right. That
Or
I didn't do
what,
it perfectly.
whatever, if it was whoa, that was really harsh. But
Yeah.
she didn't really mean that.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't the harshness that way. It was this other thing. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So, okay, we have
Love it.
we have a lot of things around, if you're
too.
banking on small talk and you're banking on the outings to create connection,
Probably not the best idea.
probably not the best idea. And, those are great. I'm not saying those are not good ideas, but how do we get past that and get in the deeper conversations and really experiencing the connection with ourselves and the connection with others at work that we really want to experience, and that might not be everybody on your team, but there might be one or two people. And we know that having those relationships at work really matter too and are very important. So, practice, trust, empathy, perspective taking, and then, giving and receiving feedback to each other and really build those relationships. I think those are the big practices.
Love it.
I'm going to wrap up the show.
Let's do it.
Well, we hope you enjoyed the podcast and that you remain more inspired than ever. And we're gonna end the show now, and we're gonna get into some questions that Teddy so aptly wrote down and handed to us. So this is the question part. We hope that you stay on with us and stay connected with us. But we're gonna do that right now, and I want to get into some questions.
Okay, are you going to pause that?
Yeah, well, so I'm just gonna let it go. Okay, but I appreciate your attention to it. So we have a question from Ellen. She says here, tips for offering feedback that makes it less scary for the leader and the employee.
Oh, thank you, Ellen.
Ellen, great question. So, all right, so let's talk about this. So tips for doing this. So Ellen, here's what I would say. And
do you think this is Ellen, my mom?
I don't know. It's Ellen. It's Ellen. It could be. So, how do we make it less scary? So, a few things. I think one of the most important things is, first of all, checking in with yourself that this feedback really is coming from a place that you are for the person's success.
Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah. You really, that it's coming from a place.
I skip over that step.
You do?
I perhaps do.
Right.
You could tell me.
Right. I don't experience you that way. But I think that's the first one. And that really has everything to do with context. Are we coming from a place where we're already feeling challenged, we're already feeling defensive? And I watch this with leaders a lot because they do withhold feedback for so long, and then it just comes out as like a feedback bomb. It's just they've sat on it and they haven't said anything and they haven't shared it and they haven't shared it. And now it just you can't take it anymore. And you just blow your lid. So, Ellen, I think that's the first thing, is really making sure that you're for the person, and then getting as specific as you can with the feedback.
That's good.
Yeah, making the feedback about specific behaviors. This is the hardest part, I think, for people. And I like to say the video camera test.
That was so helpful when you mentioned that last time when I was trying to come up with examples. Yeah, I
think it's really helpful, and it's very difficult to do. It's not so easy because your mind just makes up so many stories so quickly and interprets the meaning of things and interprets the meaning of the behavior, that it gets layered on and gets piled on. So, what is the thing that you saw or that you noticed or that didn't, what's the specific thing that the video camera would record? Hey, I noticed when I asked you to do this, you rolled your eyes at me, or something. It can be that. It can be that specific around behavior, and then getting to like what matters about it, and then why is it important? And this is the part that leaders really can skip over. What's the request that you have that you want differently, and is there an agreement about that being changed?
Interesting.
Yeah.
I need an example there.
Well, for example, if I said, hey, look, I asked you to do this and you rolled your eyes and you walked away, I want you to know what's important to me is that we have good respect with each other. We have respectful engagement. Right. I might use that with each other. And what I want is that when I make a request, if there's something you disagree with, that you can be direct with me about that, and that we can have a conversation about it before there's an overreaction.
Yeah. Okay, so you're requesting that rather than roll the eyes, tell me what you're thinking. That made you roll the eyes.
That would be helpful.
Okay.
And also, then do we have an agreement now that this is what we're going to be interacting, or how we're going to be interacting
and
moving forward, right? Do we have an agreement? And in most conversations, feedback conversations like we're describing here, there's not an agreement. There's not a very specific action that we've agreed upon, and that's the piece that gets skipped. And Ellen, I hope this is answering your question, and then following up.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah. It's almost like to approach it in a way that's more formulaic.
Yeah.
A, helps with the nerves, totally, and B, ensures that I'm doing this in a way that's benefiting the person and preventing future instances of this.
So context really matters. The other thing that I would add to that is, not only that you're for the person, but the other thing that I watch is that, we just don't make feedback a regular part of the conversation.
Yeah.
And so starting to create your team so that they know that feedback's just going to be sort of a regular thing we're going to do with each other, and it doesn't have to be a bad thing, and appreciating each other as a form of feedback, appreciating the very specific things that people do and people do well. So I think all those parts help with feedback.
I would add one small thing.
Add it in.
I think that when you're at that moment where you're trying to decide, do I have this in the...
I'm sorry, I read the next question. Go ahead.
Do I have this in the best interests of... Why am I giving this feedback? Is it to help this person? If you wait a day and ask yourself that question the next day, again, I feel like it helps. If the answer is because I'm going to kill them if they ever do that again, the next day it's a little easier to see, okay, I can't say that. So what could I actually, why am I doing this? What is this going to affect?
Yeah.
But to your point, not waiting so long that you do explode and say, I'm going to kill you if you ever do that again.
Right, ever again. Please don't ever do that again. Exactly. All right. Thank you for adding that, Marta. All right. Okay. So Susan says, as a leader, how can I consciously shift my organization's culture away from boozing?
Love it.
That's so good, Susan.
Good point to turn. Susan, love it.
Susan, love it. All right.
Jeez, so that's a question.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, culture questions they're difficult to manage in a sense that, if you're talking about there's a whole group of people who are sort of colluding, and probably unconsciously, but colluding to sort of be a certain way, how do you start to shift that? And I think, Susan, the easiest answer I can give is, it all begins at home, like within ourselves.
Yeah.
And this can be really vulnerable because if that's the way, the teams are interacting and now you're going to be sort of the odd man out,
right.
that can feel really scary. So being in your own skin around that's helpful. And, maybe you create some opportunities for you and a few folks to go out that don't involve boozing all the time.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Like, if you're the one who's in the position that you're organizing these things, maybe make it an activity where, like, it wouldn't sound good to drink beer and do whatever that thing is.
Yeah, like you all go to
or
the
like
other
beer
place.
is not available.
Yeah,
Whatever.
something like that. So shifting a whole culture around it might be a little bit more challenging depending on your role. But I think instead of worrying about, sort of trying to change that, kind of going towards like, well, how do I create more events where that isn't part of what we're doing might be helpful.
Yeah, I like
That's
that.
a really great question.
Good place to start.
Culture questions. All right. This is from John. How do you handle returning to work after over socializing and perhaps damaging relationships? John, that's
I
so
feel like
good.
Teddy might have some advice on this.
Yes.
Not from your experience, just from some stories I've heard.
That's so good. Yeah. Okay. So I want to reveal that I lived this.
Okay, tell me.
I lived
everything.
this. Well, I'm going to tell
Can't
you
wait to
everything.
hear this.
It was that, well, again, alcohol, puts us below our consciousness.
Yeah.
So to your point, inhibitions are, by the wayside,
Yeah.
and, arguments ensued. And, the truth is, from my experience, it was really just a matter of that next morning going and clearing that up. And
Yeah, just like biting the bullet and do it.
yeah,
just be
just say, look, I
honest.
know I got really out over my skis on Friday. I had way too much to drink, and I said some things that I didn't mean. I did some things that I'm really not, not proud of at all, and I want to own that with you and just clear that up and let you know that, if there's any way that hurt your feelings, I want to just own that. And I just had to go clean it up, just had to clean it up because it wasn't
That's
horrible.
so nice. I like that you started with out over my skis. Like that's
with the boozing.
Yeah, that's like such a like gentle. In my head, I was like, I think it was more than that. But okay. And I like that you said you didn't just say, I'm sorry about Saturday. I'm sorry that was crazy. I like that you said, I want to take ownership. Somehow that feels more apologetic.
Yeah.
Like it feels more like I recognize the gravity of what I was doing.
Yeah.
And not just like, I'm just doing these blanket sorries to everybody so that we can all just be happy again.
Yeah, exactly. And
like
so,
that.
I think once you have that moment, that where you literally wake up and you're like, oh,
I haven't
what did I
had that
just
with
do?
work. Have
No. Well, have you had with other relationships?
I? Oh, sure.
Wait, did you just ask me if you've ever done that at work?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Like I was trying to think back in my mind.
No. We don't have a lot of boozing events
No, we
with
really
you and
don't.
I. They're really okay. So, all right. So, great question.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, thanks, John. That was a great question. All right. So this one is from Kristen. She says, "I notice people experience shame when making a mistake. Is it best to address emotions that you see coming up, or remain neutral and objective and ignore what you see going on?" Oh,
Ooh, that's such a good one.
that's such a good question.
Okay, wait, I want to read it again.
All right. So, are you going to read it?
Yeah, okay. I notice people experience shame when making a mistake. Is it best to address emotions that you see coming up or remain neutral and objective and ignore what you see going on? I have a response to this. Do you mind if I start?
I don't.
My first instinct is I like that she notices that. I like that she's saying, like, they feel ashamed because they made a mistake, and I don't want them to feel that way.
Yeah,
That's so
of course.
me. And
Yeah.
you want to be like, no, it's nothing to be ashamed of. I feel like first, it's better, and you're so good at this. It's like, I feel like Kristen and I just want to make everything like, no. Like,
Yeah.
stop doing that.
Don't do that.
First, ask what the person is experiencing, because maybe it's not shame.
Oh.
Or maybe the person doesn't want to talk about, like, it's embarrassing enough that they feel that they're, like, physically ashamed standing there. I feel like it's better just to say, and you say this a lot, like, what's coming up for you when we're talking about this? Or, like, how does that make you feel? Or what are you thinking right now? Or, I don't know. I feel like that's a little bit better. And then if they want to go there, like, I just feel so ashamed.
Yeah. Yeah.
They'll feel better, and you'll feel good that they confided in you, or they're just like, I feel embarrassed.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, to your point,
What do you think?
well, what I think is, I think when anyone's having an experience, you don't have to make them dive into their experience further, but I do think because that people are responsible for how deep they want to go into their experience. But I do think that when you see something happening for a human, and I'll share a story for another human, to just acknowledge that there may be something happening.
Yeah.
And you don't know what it is, and you don't
Right.
need to know what it is. But just, I was facilitating a group, and the woman, she started crying. And so for me to sit there and just kind of keep talking and,
Right.
that doesn't feel, first of all, it doesn't feel real friendly to me to know that I can sense something going on, and I'm not honoring my own experience then either. And I'm trying to gloss over it. And then secondarily, it can feel sort of dismissing of the person's experience.
Totally.
She knows, it's sort of like now there's the space in between that we're not acknowledging, that she knows something's going on, I said something's going on, and we're just going to not pay attention to it.
So awkward.
It is awkward, and I think it's something that we've sort of been taught over time to do that. Kristen, I think it's such a great question, to sort of just blow past people's experience because it's uncomfortable, and it is. It is, especially when somebody starts having an emotional response, or when people are presenting, you're watching like their neck get really red or something, and now if they're talking, it's not interrupting them.
Yeah.
They're like,
What's happening right now for you?
That's probably not necessary. Letting them get with their experience, and then if something else starts arising, then acknowledging it, that sort of thing. So I think it's worthy of our time when people start having an experience, especially around shame or embarrassment or whatever version of that we want to talk about. It can be really, really empathic to acknowledge people's experience. Yeah.
Wait, what's your story?
That was my story. The person was starting to cry. I was starting to facilitate.
Wait, so what'd you say? What happened?
I just said, I noticed that you might be having an experience over there.
Yeah.
Is something coming up for you that you'd like to share? And guess what? She said, no, not right now.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. She said, no, not right now.
Yeah.
And guess what happened? 30 minutes later, then she shared what was occurring. Right?
It's almost like, like providing space.
Yes.
For if they want, if now's the time for them to acknowledge what they're experiencing, you have provided that space and you've recognized something's going on for you.
Yeah.
And allowing for that person then, if she knows if she starts talking, she's just gonna sob for the next 20 minutes. Like she realizes, no, this is not.
Yeah.
This isn't serving anything for me to try to talk right now.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that.
Yep.
You're like an expert or something.
Let's not get crazy here.
That's like you do this for your day job.
Yeah, it's like I do this. All right, this question comes from Daisy.
Yay!
Fave non-boozy social activity.
Oh, this is so good. Okay, I have one. Oh, but it involves bathing suits. I was just thinking about paddleboarding, and then I was like, oh, maybe that's really uncomfortable for people.
But is that your favorite? Well,
I think
what
that's
kind of
fun
bathing
to
suit are
do.
you wearing?
I'm fine with it, but I think if it's a work thing and people are like, no, but you're like, we're all going to go paddleboarding, and people are like, really? You're going to make me wear my bathing suit in front of my work colleagues? Like, that's a little weird.
T-shirt or something.
You could do that. Yeah, you can do that when you're paddleboarding. Good point.
Yeah.
So I love paddleboarding. It's so fun. It's soothing. You can do it with a bunch of people. You really can't drink while you do it.
Yeah. Well, typically not, right?
So
I have a couple favorite, non-boozy activities. Now, one of them can involve booze, though, so you have to be careful about it. But I love going to see comedy shows.
Yeah,
comedians. You just have to be careful.
So fun.
You have to be careful though, because a lot of comedy venues want you to drink, so you have to be.
Yeah, most of them are like 2 drink minimum.
Yeah, but they're really about laughing together and getting together. So I really enjoy that.
That's such a good one.
Yeah, and
then you have stuff to talk about that's not small talky.
Exactly, afterwards.
It's like a date.
It is like a date. And the second one is actually going to, now this has to be set up well, but actually going to see a movie together, right? And I had this experience, I think in my first job, we all went, there was a big group of us that went, and we watched the movie about the, I think it was the 1980 U.S. hockey team.
Oh.
And there were a few of us that got together afterwards, and we talked when they played the Russians. The U.S. was not supposed to win at all. And we all got together afterwards, and we talked about it, and we talked about it in relation to work.
Oh, that's interesting.
It was super fun, and there was no booze involved in that. There was a lot of popcorn, but there was no booze. So I like going to see movies that are meaningful. And it's just such a great question, Daisy. But it has to be set up in a way that's like, you're going to have a conversation about it afterwards. I think the humanities are a great place to connect. Like you had your book club. Totally. The humanities are a great place to connect. And some people do, they do book clubs at work, which I think are great. Right. And they can be leadership books or books that are more, non-leadership. Fiction is great for that as well. So those are some of my favorites, Daisy.
I also think, like any sort of I used to go to this camp and they had like a high ropes course and a low ropes course.
Yeah.
And each of them were just like these physical challenges where you had to work together as a team and have all these like devise all these strategies. Like, how are we going to get this person who's blindfolded all the way across to this end of the log without any of us touching the ground?
Yeah.
Like, that stuff is so fun. And
very fun.
a lot of people hate that stuff, but I love that stuff. I think it's great.
Yeah. I think
The other thing I was thinking of is, that's like related to that. Oh, I just lost it. Okay, I'll think of it later.
To your more to your point, I've also done a couple of these with people that I work with where it was like a scavenger hunt.
Yeah.
But it was sort of like a race scavenger hunt. So you like were on a bike and then you walked and you had to run, and there were periods where you couldn't run, like they made you walk.
Yeah.
Which is really fun. And one of them, and I remember you made me remember when you said it. One of them was like I was blindfolded, and it was like you had to get me around a certain way, and I couldn't, and I had to hold an egg on a spoon, but I was blindfolded.
Anything weird
really
like that is so fun.
Yeah, it was very fun.
And provides that sort of like insta bonding that people want from the boozy events that isn't really genuine insta bonding. It's like everyone's sort of like everybody's having fun.
Which fits into the play
nervous.
category.
You don't have to have like stuff to talk about because you're just doing this stuff together.
Which fits into the play category, I think.
Totally.
For the connection part of it, I think that's where we're talking about the humanities and things can bring people into greater connection and create a safe environment too.
Totally.
Yeah.
I love that.
All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up. Thank you for showing up on our live podcast recording. It was super fun being with you, and we will look forward to being with you again next week.
We'll do it again sometime. Bye.